Well, hi everyone. Welcome back to our number 39 edition of or episode of the Bob and Chad uh, Tech and Tips show that we missed a couple weeks ago here. We've been gone for, I guess it's been almost a month now. And so it's good to be back. So I'm quite sure a lot of you have some questions out there, and make sure we'll do what we can do to get through your questions. And how's everything with you, Chad?
Good, yeah, we're plugging away. Busier than we've ever been this time of year, so we're just trucking right along. The boys are actually in the back working on the factory support trailer. I guess we're gonna go back out on the road. I think next week we'll be at the 141 for the Clash at the Creek, and I think we're gonna go right to Cedar Lake for the Masters. So next week we'll be for some trackside stuff. So looking forward to getting back on the road. We'll hit a couple local shows, but nothing with the trailer since Bristol. So excited to get out again and see the local people.
Yeah, it's kind of the same situation we've had going on here. I mean, we're busier than we've ever been, uh, booking stuff out further than I would really like to see it. We've been kind of surprised. The new car market has been really strong for some reason this time of the year, which from our perspective hasn't been that great in the past. But boy, this year seems to be good. Can't complain. You know, new GRT stuff working pretty good. Jake McBurney, second night out, won at Marshalltown, and pretty happy with his car. I think he was going to have a pretty decent finish on Saturday night. Kind of got cut across the nose and ended up spinning the car out. And luckily, everybody missed him, so we didn't have anything to worry about repairing there, and so we're good. Now, tomorrow night, our buddy Rocky leaves for the North Dakota Sport Mod Tour, so he's going to be gone a week. That's going to be one of those deals we planned for it, but his schedule when he gets back is going to be barely sleep time, and I mean barely sleep time. So that's good. It's fun. Uh, Anything else going on? Any places you've been? Any racetracks you have been to? Illegal local stuff?
Yeah, I've been to Deer Creek a couple weeks ago for the USMTS. That was a pretty good show. That place was really racy like usual. And last Friday I went to Fountain City. That was a MLRA race. That was a pretty good show too. So a lot of good racing, man. The short track is pretty strong right now. So we're just excited to be a part of it and do our part.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, there's some of the weekly shows, the car counts maybe, have struggled a little bit, but boy, it seems like whenever there's a special event, there's not a shortage of cars. I think people are picking and choosing some of the racing that they're doing, but they're not cutting back on racing. They're just racing differently and running more of the specials and things like that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. You got a new product.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
This is the Billy Steinberg innovated body tab. You can put it in a tab on the chassis, or it fits all of our clamp-on hood pin mounts. So basically we just took the hood pin and drilled it and tapped it for a 1/4 20 for a body bolt. So if you want to do a roof mount, engine panel, pretty much anywhere you want to use a body fastener, you can get creative with all of our different clamp-on brackets. So those are available now at wehrsmachine.com.
Awesome. Well, that sounds pretty cool. Well, one of the things that I had that I wanted to go over, of course, I'm one of these guys where I have way more tools than really probably what I need to have. But it's kind of one of those deals where if I need this particular tool to do a job, even though I might only do it once every 7 years, it's just a deal where it's extremely frustrating when you don't have the correct equipment to do what you're doing. So it never ceases to amaze me when I go to the racetrack and I watch some of these guys working on their stuff, and I'm thinking to myself, I watched a guy the other night nice powder coat spindles, and he's over there beating the heck out of the spindle, which luckily it's not damaging the paint because they're using a rubber hammer, but they can't break the ball joint loose. And I'm like, well, don't you have one of these Wehrs tools that I support all the time, these ball joint removers? Well, no, I guess we don't. So that, no problem. We'll just walk down the line here, and so we went to about 6 different pit areas, and nobody had this tool. And I'm sitting there going, I feel bad. I'm not doing my job good enough here. I'm like, geez, I talk about these things all the time, and it just blows me away. So that's my little episode on tools. There's a company in Bangor, Wisconsin that has an excellent group of tools, and you need to look through their website. You can look on our website. We got all that stuff covered, and it's just. And what are these? $30?
Yeah, 28, 30, 34.
28. So. I mean, yeah. So I mean, it's a situation where I don't know what cases of beer cost, but more than likely to go through that more than that some night anyway. So anyway, that's kind of my point.
Yeah, once you use it, you'll be pretty happy that you don't beat on your spindles anymore.
Well, sure. Now that I got used to using one of these things, it's just like, oh, what, it's over there, wham, 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 and I'm like going, brand new powder coated spindles. Oh gosh. But needless to say, they will have one of these tools in their toolbox for next weekend of racing, I guarantee you. And all of those of you guys that do not have this ball joint remover, Chad just told you, WehrsMachine.com. They're also available at BobHarrisENT.com, and they're $30 or right around $30. Shipping can't be more than $6, so you need to get on that. Save yourself a lot of frustration. One of the other things that I've noticed, we've had some situations where the nights that I've been at the racetrack, I've observed a few cars having some inconsistent handling issues. And in my opinion, I think a lot of these handling issues go back to the brakes. And so I kind of got to recommend to everybody that all of our episodes are on YouTube. And that episode, I don't know whether it was probably episode 5, 6, or 7 or something, when we had Ben Baker on talking about brakes. You need to go back and listen to that video, because a lot of your handling problems are caused by inconsistency in the brake system. I talked to the driver of this one car, and he kept saying, he said, I could never get the car underneath me. I could never really feel consistent with it. So then I got to talking to the guy that was running behind him, and he said, I don't know what he was doing, never seen it happen, but I've never seen a race car do that many different things in one corner. And I said, when it's doing that, it's either a suspension bind of some sort, which I'm pretty confident these guys do a good job of maintenance. And I personally believe it probably has something to do with their brakes. And that's kind of what I told them, that this week they need to go through their whole brake system. And, it's a situation where if they have, calipers from last year and set over the winter, and if they were in one of those garages that the humidity level changed quite a bit, and there's all kinds of stuff that could cause these problems. So definitely look at that. Okay, question. Raymond's got a question. He's got a 3,000-pound Camaro Clip Pro Stock UMP rules open motor, rear end wants to wander out on dry slick. In phase 3, 55% rear, 54% left side. In my opinion, Raymond, from my experiences, there's probably a trail issue. Your rear end needs to be, in a static position. The rear end needs to be a little bit of lead put in the rear end, where the right side, the rear end is slightly ahead, 1/4 of an inch or whatever, so that when the suspension moves, and I'm not sure, and don't get me wrong, I don't completely know your stock UMP rules, but most generally when a car has a situation where it wants to kick the tail out coming off the corner, you put a little bit of lead in that car, moving that rear end ahead on the right or behind on the back on the left, definitely is a good plan. Chris, thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. Those ball joint tools are amazing. And like I said, when I'm watching this hammer just bang, 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 and I'm thinking to myself, this is stupid. Well, there's a tool made out there to fix this problem, let alone just the inertia going through your arm and everything. Wow. Dan, IMCA modified crate motor, pros and cons to lighter pull bar springs. Well, to be honest with you, Dan, I'm not so convinced on a lighter spring in the pull bar, depending on what model pull bar you have. But when the racetrack does get slick, I think it's not a bad idea to gain a little bit more travel. A lot of pull bars, have a shim in there where you can actually take the shim out of the pull bar and increase the travel a little bit. I know Chad's stuff is that way. That increasing movement, in my opinion, is probably more important than the spring itself, but still, going lighter, depends on the track conditions, but I've not found that's the case. I think what's your opinion then, Chad?
Well, it's hard to say what he means by lighter. I mean, you're talking about a 400-pound spring straight rate, or are you talking about going from a progressive to a straight rate 1200 or a 1200 to 1000? So, I mean, yes, a little bit more traction, a little more travel is going to do exactly what you said there. So, if you're talking about going really soft, you're going to need something else to control that motion anyway. So, I don't know how soft you're talking about going there, but everything is.
In the old rule of thumb, the sport mods run a solid link. So solid link still has traction. In my opinion, I think when you get on something that's really slick, increasing the movement without changing the spring, in my opinion, would be a better route to go. Rick, on a Northern Sport mod, would stiffening the right rear spring give the same effect as chaining the left front down? Not actually. No, it actually wouldn't. When you put a stiffer spring in one corner of the car, when the car goes to transfer and the weight transfers onto the spring, the stiffer spring will actually load the tire more and actually create more side bite. The chain would actually take some side bite away from the car. So a lot of times, believe it or not, we have guys that would chain the left front a little bit more and then would actually increase their spring rate on the right rear. But it also depends on where you're running and stuff, because that spring does give you more side bite getting into the corner, but it can overwork the right rear tire on a long race coming off the corner depending on your suspension. So it's kind of a give or take. And chaining the left front on a Northern Sport mod would not be legal in IMCA's rule book. Shauna, how do you know when you are on the right front too much? What would make it push up the racetrack? Well, Shauna, most of the time what's going to happen is when it pushes up the racetrack is when you're on the right front too hard and the frame gets into the racetrack. That's usually like when the car goes in, rotates on the right front, starts to turn, and everything's feeling good. All of a sudden, the front end takes off up the racetrack. That's when it bottomed out on the frame, and then it just kind of produces a ski effect, because now all of a sudden, when it hit the frame rail, it let all the pressure off of the tire, and the tire is no longer sticking. So more than likely, that's the problem. Dan, suggestions for getting on the right front better. IMCA crate running the 475 right front spring, dry slick. Thanks for all the help. Learned tons. Learned tons already from both of you guys. Well, we appreciate it, Dan. We enjoy doing this, and it's a lot of fun. Last week or the last 2 weeks ago, I wasn't able to be on, and I was kind of actually lost there for a minute. Like, we didn't have our normal Bob and Chad show here. Getting on the right front more, softer compression shock is something to consider. You know, putting a little bit more angle in the left rear might not be a bad idea. That can help get the car on the right front a little bit more. Kind of depends on what you're looking for, but overall, on that situation, you're already running a relatively soft spring. So if it's still not getting there, I hesitate to tell you to try a softer shock. That would help, but I'm not so sure there's not a balance issue somewhere in the car. I'd look more on the left rear, trying to make sure that the left rear is getting the height that it needs to get, which will drive the car over. And if you have a brake floater, you know, make sure you've got some angle in that brake floater. That will help the car. And when you get in and trail brake it, that'll help it drive over. TJ, IMCA Sport Mod, running 56% rear weight. On track with moisture, it's a rocket. It's struggling to get hooked up in the dry and get over on the right rear. How much lead would you add for the percentage at the racetrack? How much lead you would add for percentage at the racetrack for a slick situation? Very aware of the throttle and trail braking. It's buzzing as soon as I touch the throttle. Boy, TJ, I would really go through my rear suspension and make sure that there's not something binding someplace. Actually, even possibly the front end. If there's something not letting the car transfer to the weight, it shouldn't be in that situation. I wouldn't add more rear percentage. I think you're pretty strong there. I would look into your spring and shock package, and trying to get some of that out might be a good idea. All right, we even running the right rear bar flat and only getting maybe an inch of travel. I'm at 13 degrees on my pull bar. You could probably put a little bit more angle in the pull bar. It might help you. I'm a little hesitant sometimes to add angle to a pull bar because what might help you coming off could help you, or could not help you getting in. But I would definitely look at my spring and shock combination and really go through and make sure that there's nothing binding in that rear suspension somewhere. To free the car up on exit on throttle, what are my options? Well, if the car's too tight on throttle, that's usually a fairly easier, one of the easier fixes. You can add stagger, you could put some trail in the car, you could put more angle in the right rear trailing arm. Those would be my 3 points that I would probably look at. That's something that's definitely doable. Hope to see you guys at 141 for the Clash at the Creek. Dan, I hope that I can make it up there. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to make it yet, but I hopefully can be able to have an answer by the end of this week. Kind of depends on, we're so busy here, and with Rocky going to the North Dakota Sport Mod Tour and Bobby wanting to go to the Minnesota races, there's just not enough for me to go around right at this point in time. And I was thinking that I was supposed to be trimming this thing back a little bit, and I'm like, But anyway, a good point, Chris. The guy that was talking about not getting on the right front, he could take some angle out of the pull bar. That might help too. Matthew, can you go too low with the spring table on the right rear? What would it cost? Yeah, you can go too low on the spring table. What happens with, you get too low on the spring table, you have to go such a stiff spring that it makes the car kind of a little erratic, where it rolls over and and Chad, you can highlight on this one. I mean, it kind of rolls over and it just sort of lays there.
Yeah, we've built extenders up to 4 inches, and it just, like you said, you have to put such a stiff spring in there. Well, then it's so tight driving into the corner that it wasn't a good balance. Anything past 2 inches or 3 inches was pretty much the max. Some sport mods can get a little more, but I think the suspension, the limited suspension, more probably helps with the 2-link car versus the 4-link car. But
Right.
on the 4-link A mods, anything past 2 is pretty drastic.
Yeah, it's just makes them way too sensitive on corner entry and inconsistent to drive. All right, we even are running the right rear flat. Oh, we already got that one. What can I do to keep the right front frame from dragging? Well, there's a situation where depending if the right front, if it's getting on the right front too much, you might have to stiffen that spring up. A lot of times though, you're maybe have too much bar angle in the left rear, maybe too much chain drop in the left rear. More than likely, it's not always a right front issue. It can be a left rear issue too. So you just got to kind of look at the total balance of the car. One of the things that, this is beside the point, but we sell them, we buy them actually from Performance Bodies that are on their website. They actually have a kit now that plugs that frame hole and that actually, believe it or not, it helps the cars, kind of creates a little bit more of a skid pad so it's not digging in the dirt so much. That's not going to fix your problem, but that's something that we've sold quite a few of them, and people that have them seem to really like them. If nothing else, it keeps a lot of the mud and dirt out of the frame when you do get the car bottomed out. On the Wehrs WM460C pull bar with 3 black and 3 purple, do you put it together dry or with grease on pucks? If so, what grease?
So the 460 is an open puck bar. You put that together dry. You would grease the bronze bushings if there's a grease zerk on them, but the pucks, we don't put anything in between them. On an open bar like that with the grease out in the wide open, it's only going to attract dirt and really make a mess. Where the sleeve style bars, we grease them in between the pucks and then the inner sleeve. They need the lubrication to help them work properly, because when the puck hits the wall, there's a lot of friction there without grease. So open puck, dry, closed pucks, greased, synthetic wheel bearing grease.
Well, glad to know the crew chief is here tonight. Thanks for joining in. Austin, opinion on changes from tacky in the heat to super slick in the feature. Move bar angles, ballast, wheel offsets, IMCA modified. What's your opinion? Personally, Austin, I would caution you about making too many changes, because I've seen that bite people quite a bit. I'll give you some short scenarios, because that could be a lengthy conversation. But moving bar angles, one of the things I'd probably strongly recommend is dropping your right lower bar on the frame. That works pretty well. Sometimes moving the right lower bar up on the cage, that can help give you some side bite and some traction. The wheel offsets, definitely that's not a bad idea. For traction off the corner, I like to see my left side tires lined up. When it's real heavy, we'll suck that left rear in and move that right rear out. I don't run with a 60-inch rear end. I still would run a 3 off. I'm not a believer in that 4-inch wheel. I think that's too drastic. Gets the center too close to the ballast point in the car. I think it makes the car too sensitive. But as a norm, it's very common for me to move that right bar around. If I was to move a bar, that's what I would do. Ballast, sometimes on real slick racetracks, If it's slow getting in and you want to be tightened up getting in, you can put a little bit of ballast over the right rear. Now, don't go crazy. When I say a little bit, 1% of the car's weight is 25 pounds. So a 25 pounder, nothing over 25 pounds above the right rear would definitely help. Rick, I went from 10th place then to 6th, and last week to 3rd place. You guys are dropping some amazing knowledge, and when it applies and staying in your own notes, it shows. I'm running a 1998 Jet in the Sport Mod class. Thank you guys. Well, I appreciate it, Rick. That's awesome. That's one of the things, Chad mentions it all the time, and I mention it all the time. Joe over here in the 41 and Bill in the 2B, we're not the same drivers. We don't have the same crew. We don't have the same setup. So when you start patching in those notes, it's kind of like trying to bake an angel food cake with pepper or something like that. It doesn't mix. It's not going to work out well. Well, that would taste bad. But anyway, Rusty, how much tuning with rollout are you doing on the mods? If so, what's your idea on how much and when? Well,
explain rollout.
What?
But you got to explain rollout for those that have never heard that term.
Go ahead.
Stagger, I think, is what he means.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I'm hoping he's thinking stagger here. But yeah.
Boy, isn't that where we heard that? Was out in New York or Pennsylvania?
Yep, rollout.
Rollout. Yeah. Even the Hoosier guy was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, anyway, rollout is tire stagger. On an IMCA car, we run across the board. I've got guys running anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 inches. I myself like more stagger. It is a little bit more tricky coming off the corner. The car can tail out on you a little bit better, but I think it kind of helps the car rotate in the middle. But then again, it's kind of up to the driver and what the driver thinks and likes. So giving you an idea of a rollout, like I said, out here we're anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 on a normal basis. We're a fairly slick racetrack, and that's one of the things. A lot of times people will think, well, real slick racetrack, I need to really shorten up my stagger or shorten up my rollout. Well, the downside to that is you also slowed up your corner speed. You've got to actually roll the corner freer. It's the old coffee cup thing. If I want to go in and roll right around the bottom and come off good, I'm not so sure cutting staggers 100% all the answer to do. A lot of times I'll run more lead in the car and keep the stagger in it to get the car up off the corner straighter, and it just seems like, it just depends. If you're on a big open racetrack that's got a lot of banking to it, the stagger's not that big of an issue. If you're on a short, tight bull ring type place, stagger can be a pretty big issue. Bob on a slick track had a hard time getting car to turn. Had to jab the brakes in phase 2. What changes would you recommend? More roll steer by letting the chain out, more J-bar rake, more stagger. Chad, on the brake floater, can you go over the changes it makes by switching from the upper to the lower hole on the brake floater? Go ahead, Chad. I'll let you go first.
So when you lower the bar on the brake floater, that's going to put angle in it and make it more effective. So it's going to stand the car up quicker and get it on the right front harder than the top hole. So possibly like a short track situation where you need to turn, you'd be in the bottom hole, and a longer speedway where you'd be in the top hole. Rolling tight in them phase 2 there before the fuel, you might have a panel bar buried. Every time I see a car that's rolling tight, it's usually because the J-bar's pinned. So if you're rolling tight before the fuel, it's probably a roll center issue. What do you think of that?
I would agree with that 100%. Most generally, more J-bar rake would not be the answer. I would take some of it out. More roll steer by letting more chain out, that's definitely an option. More staggers, definitely an option. Kind of depends on what the racetrack's getting out, but if you're not getting through phase two, I don't know if it's super duper important on what you have coming off, because boy, you lose a lot of time if you can't roll the corner. Having to jab the brakes definitely would lead me to believe you're too, of course, definitely too tight. Uh, one of the J bar, yeah, a lot of people run that lower than what I think they really need to. It's kind of like the old rule of thumb. Back before we had quick changes in these modifieds, we would run the center of the pinion on the J bar. It was just a done deal, man. That's just what you did. Well, then when we went to the quick change, we still decided we would run center of the pinion on the quick change. Now, however, the center of the pinion on the quick change is 1.25 inches lower, closer to the ground, than what it would be on a 9-inch Ford. So I could never understand why people would want to. I never liked dropping it that low. So I still, like, when we send a car out of here with Chad's pull bar plate, it's 1.5 inches above the pinion when it leaves here, and I tell them 1/2 inch, one click on that pull bar or that panhard bar is all you really need. So I think a lot of times people we get to the point where we get so tight with the car because we got to have that jabbing effect getting into the corner to make sure we don't spin out. Well, and like I explained it to a customer the other night at noon, I said, you got to get to the point where you got to get it out of your head that this thing's going to spin out on you. You've got to look at the fact that, especially with a crate motor, you've got to get the car so it rolls in really free, and it feels like, oh, this is getting. But then when you get that feeling, you've got to get in the habit of jabbing the throttle. Now, back in the days when we had 650 horsepower motors, you jab the throttle and you're going to do a donut quicker than a donut can be made. But with a crate motor, it doesn't do that. It actually lugs the car down and loads the suspension and drives the car up off the corner better. So you just got to rely on free is faster, and rely on the throttle pulling yourself up underneath you. Well, hi, Pat Fagan. I appreciate your comments all the time. It's a very crazy busy time we have. It's just amazing. We were talking about it today, and Bobby was saying, he says, we've never been this busy. I said, nope, not that I can remember. And, I mean, Austin and Garrett's doing shipping, and it just amazes me. So if there is a economic situation someplace, it's not in racing. It's just we're all busy. Anybody I talk to in the industry is busy. Matthew, advantages of running a left rear shock on the front of the housing on a B mod. Well, with your USR B mod, in my opinion, running it on front of the housing is definitely an advantage, because you keep in mind you guys have a little bit more movable suspension, even though you still have the solid upper link, but you've got sliders. So by putting that shock in front of the housing, anytime the car moves as it roll steers, when that car comes up on the left rear, it's compressing into that shock and trying to lift it. So it's going to give you more traction on the throttle. I think it's a good idea. I caution you sometimes, though, you can't be super aggressive with the shock because sometimes you can pick up a throttle push. If you have too stiff a compression shock, it reacts too quickly. Who would you guys recommend for 4-link brackets, wanting to run Chad's zero index cage on an older Pierce car?
Pretty much gonna have to go to Pierce on that.
I mean,
I don't know if they're bolt-in or what, but
yeah, the problem is, I've seen some guys that have some really cool brackets, but I hate to say it, I don't actually remember who that was. I mean, our GRT stuff is made to bolt in, but we had a guy that the other day was kind of talking about that, and I tried to explain it to him that you almost have to have a jig of some sort to make sure that they're positioned right, because if they're not made for the car, you're going to have to fabricate with it, and if you don't get them in the right spot, that's just a bad situation.
I would hope that Pierce would have something. I mean, they got to have
I would
something.
think so.
Zero delay model stuff for sure.
Yeah, I would definitely contact those guys. The crew chief. Well, when I was younger, my racing mentor referred me to stagger as wedge. Okay. For a B&B stock car, what do you guys recommend for springs and ride height? Right now, I have a 1,000-pound left front, 900-pound right front, 100-pound left rear 20-inch, and a 250-pound 13-inch. Lacking a lot of grip with 60 pounds of bite. Well, Joel, in my opinion, I think those stock cars need more than 60 pounds of bite. Anybody that I've ever talked to that's running pretty quick is in that 120 to 150 range. I think that would be better. Your spring, your spring combinations are correct. Ride heights, Paul's going to be the right guy to ask on that, because I'm just not that familiar with the ride height part of it. I'm more spring and shock thing, and we have a good shock package for that. B&B's got a good shock package for that. That's the big thing we've seen in the stock car thing that's really become sensitive this year is the shock packages, and some of the stuff that we're building in for some of them guys, I had never dreamt in a million years we would ever build. But it seems like that stuff works pretty darn good. So anyway, I don't know for sure, Joel, what you have there, but that's another option. Talk to your shop guy or whatever. There's some other options there I think can definitely help you with rear grip. Chad, on your J-bar mount on the quick change, what measurement is the zero mark?
That should be center line of the pinion.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
If it's lasered right, it should be.
Right, because I always run it 1.25 inches above that zero mark, so I'm hoping it's center opinion. Cole, front stagger, tacky versus dry, narrow corner versus sweeping corner. Any recommendations? Front stagger, in my opinion, is way more important than a lot of people give it credit for. In my personal opinion, I've always liked to run 1 inch of stagger on a racetrack, a standard type racetrack. Sometimes on a real dry slick racetrack, rather than close up my rear stagger, I'll actually open up my front stagger and run more front stagger, because front stagger makes the car turn going in, so allows it to roll getting in. Even though it's an independent suspension, it's still that coffee cup theory that rolls it in. Tighter racetrack, I think a little more front stagger would help the car turn, roll around the bottom better. On a big sweeping corner racetrack, I think 1 inch is sufficient. I don't know on a big sweeping racetrack if a guy's going to really actually notice a tremendous amount of difference, but I always run at least 1 inch. We've got a lot of customers running 1.5 inches. I'm not a fan of running under 1 inch. I think it just helps the car turn.
Back to the crew chief there when he talked about stagger and wedge, that in my opinion the front stagger is acting like wedge. That's
correct,
where that correlation comes.
Exactly. Adding a little bit more, and that's the thing. You say you're sitting here with 2 inches of rear stagger and 1 inch of front stagger. If you change to 2 inches of stagger in the front and 2 inches in the back, if you were to put the car on the scale, you're going to have more wedge in the car, and it's definitely going to be left rear heavy. Now, what that's going to do is that's going to actually free the car up a little better getting in and allow the car to turn down better. So it takes a little bit of the side bite part of the stagger, because more stagger in the rear, it will actually be a little tighter on corner entry, and then it frees it up once you're back on the throttle. I mean, I tell you what, there's a lot of stuff that can be done with tire stagger, and people overlook that numerous times. Jeremy, I just welded a set of Pierce brackets in an older Pierce car with no problem. PM me if you have any questions. Well, thanks, Jeremy. I appreciate you helping that guy out. That's very kind of you. Mike, what could cause an IMCA Sport Mod to be quick for 2 laps, then progressively get slower through the race? I have noticed a considerable hotter right rear than left rear. Well, you know, it all depends on what you're, it just all depends on what you're actually, how the car's set up. That would lead me to believe that the car's set up right rear tight, real stiff right rear spring, which will help the car when the tire's cool. When the tire starts to warm up, it starts to lose a little bit of side bite, and it's getting harder on that particular tire. And what will happen is you'll find the more load on that tire, especially running the IMCA tire, if you have some restarts or whatever, that right rear tire will glaze over very quickly if it's very hot. Once it glazes over, you're along for the ride till the race is over. I mean, it is what it is. That's just kind of the way it goes. But Kate Richards picked up our 5th win of the season. Kate's one of our stock car guys out there in Nebraska. Does an awesome job, promotes our products really well, loves our shock package, learned a ton at RTI schools, and for a homemade car. And this is the deal. This young man, a couple weeks ago, won the race with Jordan Grabowski and the name's the guy that works at Speedway Motors. That's a heck of a stock car driver. Can you think of who I'm talking about?
It's on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, I can't think of his name either. But anyway, I mean, these guys are 2 of the very best stock car guys I've ever seen. And Cade, in his home-built race car, put a whooping on those boys.
Vanover.
Yeah, there you go. That's Kyle Vanover. Kristen, what do you recommend for hobbies for traction? Just doesn't seem to have any grip. Boy, you know, Kristen, I hate to tell you, but I'm not necessarily super knowledgeable on hobby stock stuff. I know we've got some guys. Bobby works with a lot of the hobby stock guys. I've just not actually had the pleasure of working with some of the guys. I know we've got some guys that are going really good. Caden Reynolds has been doing very well, and so yeah. But I wished I could answer your question, but I apologize, I can't. I've got a 1996 Harris Sport Mod. Ended up ripping the Panhard bar mount off the rear end. Now I have the opportunity to start fresh with a new one. What's the best, in your opinion, location for the new mount? Also, how is it recommended to set the rear end left to right? Well, Joby, I'm glad you're still running that car. I mean, that's those cars were designed as 2-link cars back in the day, and they always worked well. We've actually got a bracket that we make here. It's a combination of the bracket that Chad makes, and then we actually conform it so it fits right on. I'd highly actually recommend that, but in my opinion, I would probably put it, your rule in your Northern Sport Mod is going to have to be 23 inches center to center. You don't want to go too far outside the frame rail, otherwise you create kind of a wild swinging arc. But I just as soon like to see it as close to the center of the rear end. It'll still be to the right side of the rear end a little bit, but as close to the center. Pretty much where that one was before, only about 4 inches closer to the center than what the original one was. Straight away from a builder setup on my northern and have won 5 features so far this year. Thanks for all you guys do. Well, appreciate that, Matt. Opinion on indexing on zero indexing in dynamic. Also a good starting point for dynamic left bar angle. Thanks, Jeremy, for telling us who that was. I couldn't think of Kyle's name. I had it right on the tip of my tongue. I mean, I had his image and the whole thing. And I'm like, God, I can't remember his name. What's your opinion on that, Chad? Indexing.
Well, the dynamic of zero indexing is, a lot of people, we go over this a lot, but a lot of people think zero index means it's zero index at droop, and that's wrong. You want to be 0 to 3 degrees into the spring at ride height or static, and as the car hikes and goes into dynamic motion, it still indexes. So, at dynamic, you're going to have about 15 to 20 degrees index into the spring. As far as dynamic bar angles, again, you're too many variables there to, depending on the chain and whatnot. And, we can't tell you 52 and you over index at 52. So I'd say you should be staying in that 48 degree just to be safe. And then, tune accordingly. If you can go a little more without over indexing and camming over, then that's what you do. So.
Yep, I would agree with that completely. One thing I wanted to talk about was 56 days to the 30th annual Harris Clash at the prestigious Deer Creek Speedway in Spring Valley, Minnesota. 30 years. 30
Wow.
years. That's almost half of my lifetime that we've been doing the Harris Clash. Wow. IMCA's longest running one-day event. And once again, the Harris Clash Race of Champions is going to be brought to you by Wehrs Machine and Racing Products. Last year, Ethan Dotson became one of 4 two-time winners. Cody Thompson last year, who was a Sport Mod champion, now has moved up to the modified. So Cody actually qualifies for this race by winning the Sport Mod event and moving up there. Another Sport Mod driver that's qualified this year, Doug Smith, moved into a brand new Rage IMCA car. So he won the Harris Clash Modified or the Sport Mod event in 2013 and 2015. So we're still going to be able to add, or we're going to add 2 cars to that long list of champions for that 10 lap, 1,000 to win. We might have to go 12 laps depending on the car count, but and the 1,000 to win race, $100 to start. So can't tell you guys enough how pumped I'm up for this. How pumped I am for this 30th anniversary. It's a pretty good milestone, and now that I'm kind of getting in that towards the other end of the spectrum of this thing, a lot of those things mean a whole lot more to me now than what I would ever thought they would. So registration is open. You can go on to the Harris Clash at My Race Pass, or you can go on to the Harris Clash website, harrisclash.com, under the registration button. And remember, 56 days. That's going to go very quick. So don't forget, guys, need to register, get going on this. We're looking forward to it. Deer Creek's one of the premier facilities. And like I said, this is IMCA's longest running one-day event, and we're proud to be part of that whole operation. And it's been a great thing to be able to do this for 30 years, and so we're looking forward to it.
I guess okay. The trophies, huh?
What? Hey, and I've actually even I submitted into that trophy, the other trophy co-sponsor, AFCO Racing Products, Ben, my buddy Baker, that we needed shocks. So I've already committed to that deal. On top of it, from there, you have his number.
Sooner than later.
Yeah. So anyway, Rick, Ruben Fredesco, lots of information on here. I have if you have time to watch later. Oh yeah, good idea. You bet. Michael, I'm new here. On a 4-bar sport mod, when do you adjust the lower bar? Well, it depends on which lower bar you're talking about. Most generally, there isn't 4-bar sport mod cars, so I'm going to assume you're probably running maybe somewhere that's
UMP.
UMP. Okay, UMP mod, a B mod. Well, anyway, if you want to adjust the left rear lower bar, the lower bars tend to be your steer bars. So in my opinion, if you need more steer in the middle of the corner, you raise the left lower bar up. You need the car to be freer in the middle of the corner. Getting into the corner, you raise the right lower bar up. And opposite for those conditions if you need. If the car needs to be tighter on corner entry, dropping the right lower bar on the frame will tighten the car up, getting into the corner, take steer out of the car. So they actually either increase steer or take steer out of the car, so that kind of helps you understand that. When adjusting the lower bar length forward or backward, do you adjust the upper bar the same? Yes, I do. When you run anytime on a 4-link car, if you're going to adjust one of the bars, you got to adjust the upper bar and the lower bar the same amount. And if you decide you're going to adjust it a lot, keep in mind you can usually adjust one turn, which is 1/8 of an inch, and not really mess with anything much. If you go to 1/4 of an inch, like you need to shorten, if you're putting lead in the car, you would need to shorten your right side 1/8 of an inch, one turn on each one, and lengthen your left side, one turn on each one. Then your pinion angle stays the same. Otherwise, if you move it all on one, you're going to have to readjust your pinion angle because the pinion angle will change. Jeff, what's the benefit of lowering front ride heights on an IMCA modified? Have 8 inches to the center of lower control arm. Well, it changes the roll center, puts more angle in the upper control arms, and I don't know, it just, to me, of course, it depends on what the ball joints you have and what the actual roll center of the car is, but even if I take whatever brand it is, lower the front end, it just seems to make the front end stick better getting into the corner. But it's changing the roll center is what it's doing by doing that. And changing, putting different angles, more angles in the A-frames themselves. Can you explain chaining the right rear? What would it do from tighten to loose in static? Go ahead, Chad.
Well, this takes me back to circa 2009 when we started chaining the right rear down, and we found massive grip. When you preload the suspension with a chain, you store the load, so it gives you exit traction. And we kept putting that in more and more. And one night my brother was like, I need more. It was so good in the heat. Give me a little more. Well, we gave him a little more, and it was really fast for 3 laps. And then the track developed a hole. And when you chain that right rear down and you have holes or rough track, it's fence city. So there's definitely grip in chaining the right rear, and you're keeping the suspension loaded on the spring, which drives the tire in the racetrack. So definitely traction, but you really have to be careful with any kind of chop or rough, or you need to let the suspension go through motion then, otherwise it's just gonna shoot you right into the fence like we did back in 09 and destroyed a race car.
Well, the thing that'll trick you too on this thing is people say, well, as long as the racetrack's smooth, you can get by with it. Well, if you've never walked out on a racetrack that looks super smooth, that had been sheep's footed till God knows when, that thing, all those open little craters in there, it's like this pounding effect that those tires go through. And people don't understand the fact that, yeah, I mean, yes, it's smooth in comparison to craters, but it still is not as smooth as you think. And anytime you tighten that chain down, it does create traction, but it can get you in trouble too. I actually set the chain I jacked the car up and I set the chain to the point where my spring sets in there just free. It doesn't have any pressure on it, but it doesn't have any slop on the coilover, so that it just has minimal load on it. I agree with you, Pat. I'm ready. I'm not sure what we're ready for, but I'm what? Oh yeah.
The
Oh,
trophy. The
trophy.
trophy. He always gets his number like the day before we need the drive shaft, and then he's the one that gets the real pressure. But it all goes back to Ben not getting me the shots.
There we go. Yeah. The trophies look pretty nice with the drive shaft in it. Jig. On a 3-link UMP Sport mod, when fighting a car that is freewheeling, if I move the J-bar above the pinion, do I want to take away some of this J-bar split or move? Yeah, you're still going to probably, you're going to want to take away a little of that split, but where you're running 5.5 degrees of split, I mean, I always recommend 6. So that's pretty good. I'm not 100% sure that your problem is all of the panic bar. Panic bar definitely has a lot to do with it, but if I would be willing to bet, if you're freewheeling a car quite a bit, the rear end is too far to the left of the car. You need to actually take a string line with the same wheel offsets, string line your left side tires in line, and that's where the rear end needs to be set. If the right rear is too far inboard of the right front, it's going to do that freewheeling thing because the right rear is so close to the center of gravity that it just dumps everything all over there. Sheep's footing is much like rumble strip. You got it, the crew chief. There's no doubt about that. Sheep's footing is just like rumble strips on the highway. There's no doubt about that. Last year we went out on the racetrack afterwards with the golf cart, and I'm going just hanging on and thinking, and they say this is smooth. Oh my God! How far would you recommend dropping front ride heights from 8 that I have? I would go down to 7.5. I'd drop it 1/2 inch, and I think you'd be real happy with that. I always run my our right front usually is in that 7 3/8 to 7.5 range. Our left front's usually 7.5 to 7 5/8. Where are we at on time, Garrett? About 1 more minute. Okay, we got 1 more minute. Anything else you'd like to add, Chad?
About all I got, I guess.
I like that rumble strips. I like that rumble strips deal.
That was a good one, yeah.
That's good. I like that because that's exactly what it feels like.
We dropped a maintenance video today. Did you see that?
What?
We dropped a maintenance video on slider maintenance. Did you see it?
Oh, heavens no.
Well, doesn't your boss do that on Facebook all day?
No, I usually let everybody let me know about stuff, and somebody must have been slipping about that.
We're getting quite a few weeks in. We need to service the suspension components.
It's kind of, you're right, 100%. I mean, the suspension components, we've been racing for a while. Some of the racetracks have been rough. You just gotta. We're at that perfect time. It's the first part of June. We've already, a lot of guys have already run quite a few nights, 20 nights or so, and that's that magic number when stuff starts to fail. So definitely, no doubt about that. Maintenance. I can't say that enough. Well, thanks again. You guys have been a great group. Excellent questions tonight. We appreciate it. We will be back here a week from this, or 2 weeks from today, June 21st, and we'll be back on the 2-week schedule. I had a situation come up where I had to miss that middle week, but we've been racing since January here in Arizona, getting ready for summer, no doubt. Well, we appreciate it. all you guys with your thanks and stuff, man, it means a lot to us, and we look at that. But Chris, I tell you what, old Bo's doing a hell of a job, isn't he? Man, I tell you what, he's making us look pretty good, and he's doing a great job with that GRT car, and he's definitely got a good program. At the beginning of the year, he was running the stock car quite a bit and running the modified a little bit, and I think maintenance kind of got him a little bit there, and then it wasn't too long after that, kind of started focusing a little bit more with the modified. Man, he's had a heck of a year already. He won again last weekend, so no doubt about that. All right, well, thanks, guys. We will see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Chad.
Good luck. Thanks.